Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Sarah from Who I Am Among the Pages, and if you're new here, thanks for stopping by, and if you're not, thanks for sticking around. So today my background is different. I am back at school for the new semester. Today is MLK Day, so I do technically have the day off classes, but I do work tonight, so I do when I don't have the day off. But yeah, we are back to my school background with all my beautiful books and all my boyfriend's beautiful books. And if you hear any dog tags or just, tippy tapping around, our dog Emma is here. She will probably be making an appearance in videos. She's very sweet, very affectionate, and I think she'd do well on camera. So, nonetheless, today we are finally doing a book talk on The Secret of Sarah Revere. I read this back at the end of December. I think it was my last book of 2020. I rated it, I think it was 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And this book is another one by Anne Rinaldi. And I read this book when I was a kid, so this was a reread for me. But it had been a solid, 10, 11 years at least since I'd read it. Because it is very much meant for young readers. I think here it says ages 10 to 14, and I know I read it before then, but I can't really tell you for sure. I didn't keep track of what I read that far back. But I enjoyed it then, and I really enjoyed it now. So the story follows Sarah Revere and her experiences pre-war with her father, who is Paul Revere, who, in case you're not familiar with American history, at the beginning of the American Revolution, Paul Revere made his famous midnight ride to Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, basically bringing the message that the British were coming, that war was starting, and soon after, I believe it was at Lexington, the first shot was fired, and that was called the shot that shot her around the world. And I believe it is true that supposedly Paul Revere did know who fired the first shot, but of course in history we have no idea. We don't know if it was American, British, or who it was. I believe we do pretty much know. We have concluded that it was Americans that fired the first shot, but as far as I know, we've never figured out exactly who, and I think that's just lost to history at this point. But, so the story does follow Sarah Revere and her family, which consists of several younger siblings, an older brother and sister, and her stepmother. Her mother passed away a few years ago, and she was not, if I remember right, she wasn't the most affectionate person, and her grandmother, who lives with them, certainly is not the most affectionate person. She definitely has a favoring towards her older sister, who she's nothing like. It's a very sweet story that explores family friends, because we do see a family friend that does end up going to war, how he affects the children, and how what a good influence he is on the family, how he's calming and sort of really another father figure to the kids, as well as exploring family dynamics. And of course we have the socio-political background of the budding revolution. There's a lot of politics in this. It is very history heavy, and if anybody's overseas and not familiar with American history, specifically the American Revolution, I can see how this would be a little bit difficult to get through, because it doesn't really explain things like the Stamp Act, which is where the British started taxing paper goods such as stamps, playing cards. I think newspapers were included, anything small, everyday, and paper. And of course this covers things like the Boston Tea Party that Paul Revere was a part of, and what happened that night, what the ramifications of that were. And it's very interesting to see history that, especially as an American, and growing up in Virginia, where the curriculum until you're in high school, until you're freshman in high school, at least where I grew up, is completely focused on American history. It's something that you hear every year and is drilled into your head. To see it told from a child's perspective, especially a child of a revolutionary, it was very, very interesting, and I would definitely recommend it. So moving on, the 5 things I did really enjoy about it were, first, the child's perspective. So like I said, growing up in America, growing up in Virginia, your curriculum in history class from the time you're in 1st grade until you're a freshman in high school is entirely focused on America, and especially Virginia history. this does not take place in Virginia. This is, what is it, like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. It's up through there. So it's nowhere near where I'm from. But it is history that I'm extremely familiar with. And to see it told differently through the eyes of a child, and of course, I mean, like anybody else, I was a kid once too. And, you know, I remember how I felt and thought at that age. And I think Anne Rinaldi did a great job at capturing how these things would feel to a child. You know, her father, she's scared for her dad, she's scared for her older brother, and still just trying to grow up and deal with some of the things. She's just starting to get to the point where she's going to be going through puberty, where she's going to be growing up, becoming a woman, and we see some of those things playing out. The second thing I really enjoyed were the family dynamics. I thought the family dynamics were so well done in this book. So Paul Revere, I don't want to say he's an absentee father, because he certainly is not. But he is definitely a very hard working man. He can't be as at home as much as he would like to be. He has to do what he has to do. He's a very important person, and he's got 1,000 places to be and not enough time to be there. So we see the kind of the strain that that puts on the family, and we see how the children and how his wife, Sarah's stepmother, Rachel, handles that. And I think it's flawlessly done, because especially Paul Revere's wife, Rachel, she does struggle with her husband going away. She struggles with being afraid for him, but understanding that the world doesn't revolve around her, and that it's a sacrifice that she needs to make on the behalf of hundreds of thousands of other people. And I think it's so noble for that to be included. And we see Sarah kind of struggling with the same sort of things and coming to similar conclusions. So I really enjoyed that. And the dynamic between the siblings, particularly Sarah and her older sister Debbie, I think is pretty relatable. I have a younger sister. I'm the oldest of 3, and how Debbie and Sarah interact is much like how my sister and I act towards each other when we were about those ages. I mean, there's only a 3-year age gap between my siblings and I, but I can definitely see the older sister, younger sister dynamic, and it's done very well. It's very believable, at least for my case. I don't want to think I was ever as cruel as Debbie can be at times, but I guess that's not really for me to judge. So the third thing I really liked about the book was just the accuracy of the history. It's, you know, and I'm not gonna pretend like I'm a history scholar, like I wasn't Googling to make sure everything was right. But the way things played out and what happened and what the ramifications of everything were spot on to what I know. Again, of course, I didn't do a ton of research about the book, so I may be wrong. Somebody that maybe majored in history, works in the history field, will be able to tell me differently, but at least as far as I know, this was accurate and I enjoyed it. So moving on, really closely related to that, the fourth thing I really enjoyed about the book, in the back of this copy at least, there is a, author's note that talks about the people included in the book, because Sarah Revere was a real person. And all of the characters, for the most part, were real people. So she goes through and she takes each character, Paul Revere's mother, Sarah's grandmother, Dr. Joseph Warren, Sarah Revere, let's see, I think it goes on to talk about her sisters, Elizabeth and Debbie, Mary, who they all married, where they ended up. And I really enjoyed, after coming to the end of a story where I had a very specific view of the characters and like what they go on to do in life, I really enjoyed getting to hear what actually happened. It's like reading a book that has a cliffhanger and then having the author tell you like what really happened behind the scenes. And I think that's really interesting to include, and I really appreciated it. So the fifth thing I liked about the book, I guess it's not really specific to the book, but it was the nostalgia. I was a huge history buff as a kid, and I'm still a major history dork. And I really enjoy Anne Rinaldi's books in particular, because although they're meant for young readers, they're still very immersive. And she does a great job at tucking out your emotions without it being dramatic. She's very good at making you feel like you're in the character's shoes, even though I believe, yeah, it's written in first person. So for me, sometimes that's harder to get into if it's not written just right, because you know you're hearing from another person's perspective. But in this case, you were Sarah Revere, and I really, really liked that. So being able to go back and kind of live through that love again was really enjoyable for me. If you were a history buff as a kid, you know, Magic Tree House, the American Girl books, no, there were others that focused on history. The I Survived books, I know there was a Titanic one, and there's probably like a Civil War one. But if you were that kind of kid that was interested in that sort of thing, then I definitely think these books, you know, even they are still meant for younger readers, would be for you, because they just really call back to that wondering what the world was like, and that innocence, not knowing how serious these events actually were. It's just, it's very good. But unfortunately, there were things that I didn't care for. So the first thing I didn't care for was actually, it's called The Secret of Sarah Revere, and the book starts out with somebody coming to talk to her father and wanting to know what happened, like who fired the first shot, and then 98% of the book is all in flashback, and then it flashes forward again. So there's very, very little about the secret that she supposedly has, and I don't think she really ever quite knows what the secret is, so she doesn't have a secret to tell. So I think it could have been named a little bit better. Moving on from that, number 2 was the flashback, flash forward. I didn't care for that because when it did initially flash, it was a little bit hard to line that up with what was going on with the story, because basically you have 2 separate stories being told. The first, the main part of the book is leading up to the war, like their family and everything, how things came to be. And then the other, it's only probably like 30 pages in total, is at the very beginning and the very end. And it's like, you know, what happened in the modern day, but we don't exactly know when the modern day is. So I didn't care for that. I think that could have been better done. I mean, I still enjoyed the book, but I didn't think that was very well written. Number 3 would probably be the first person perspective. Anne Rinaldi does a very good first person perspective, but I do find it a little bit problematic in historical fiction when you assume the identity of somebody that really lived. You know, in this case, it's a white writer capturing the perspective of a white girl, but at the same time, I feel like there's a certain amount of respect that should go for somebody, especially the child of a revolutionary, that shouldn't be taken so lightly. I know there's, you know, countless historical fiction books that are written that way, and there's really nothing wrong with it, but it's just, I don't know, like, it's an enjoyable read, and it makes it very enjoyable, but knowing that this was a real person, I feel like it's a little bit disrespectful to their memory to be getting in their head and assuming what they felt and what they thought. And, you know, although maybe from diary entries and that sort of thing by people around her, by herself, we might know what she thought to a certain degree, but we'll never fully know, if that makes sense. I just feel like it's a little bit rude. So number 4, it's really hard to pick out things I didn't like about this book because, you know, it is a really good book. But number 4 would probably be the extremity of Mother Revere, so Paul Revere's mother. She is a grandmother, and she's not a very nice person, and it's made known very early that she's not a very nice person, but at the same time, it's just a little bit overdone for me. Like, she's straight up, I don't want to say abusive because that's a very loaded term, but I mean, she really pushes those kids around, and she is not nice to them. And it's like, my God, like, I cannot see, neither of my grandmothers were that way, not even close. And I can see grandmother being stricter than mine were, but I just can't imagine to the degree that she is. Like, she's living in their house and treats them all like crap. And the favoritism that she shows to Sarah's older sister, Debbie, is just a little bit crazy in my eyes. Like, I can't imagine somebody actually feeling that way towards their children or their grandchildren. And some of the ways, some of the things that she says to people are just, it's a little ridiculous. So I think maybe she was a very severe woman. But I do think that could have been done a little more gently, because it does kind of take like the grumpy old woman archetype, I guess, and like play on that. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And it makes the story a little bit less believable when she's more concerned about like snapping at her grandkids than like the revolution going on outside. Like I just think that's a little bit crazy. The fifth thing I didn't like about it was the ending. I've tried to keep this a little less spoilery than usual, but you know, I am going to spoil this here. So if you don't want to find out how it ends, go on, click out. I get it. But Dr. Warren dies. And I don't think that's a very good way to end a book made for 10 to 14 year olds. So the oldest person in this intended audience would be a freshman in high school. Maybe at that point. But, you know, I think I was more on the lines of 3rd, 4th grade when I read this, if I remember right. Because I know I was about that age when I read the other Anne Rinaldi, The Girl in Blue. And I don't know. Like, it was such a harsh way to end it with him going off and just dying all of a sudden. And, like, Sarah never really got to repair her relationship with him. And I don't know. Like, I don't think that's a very good way to end a kid's book, because yes, it teaches the idea that you need to be careful with what you say, you need to be kind, you need to treat people with decency and respect. But at the same time, like, that is so extreme for him to just go away and die. Like, I don't know. I didn't care for it. And I think books meant for a younger audience generally should have a happy ending. Maybe not, oh, you know, they all rode away into the sunset on the back of a white horse, you know, happily ever after under a magical rainbow. But there should be some kind of reconciliation. Maybe he got like horribly injured, but it didn't die. Like, I don't know. I didn't agree with the way that ended. And I remember reading the author's note, but I don't remember exactly what it said. I think Warren did end up dying. I think he did die in battle, just like in the book. But at the same time, like, ooh, bump the camera. When writing fiction, it is historical fiction. You do have the liberty to change things a little bit for the sake of your narrative. It's just my opinion. But yeah, I didn't care for the way that ended. Altogether though, wrapping this up, I did enjoy the book, and I would read it again a couple years down the road. I definitely suggest it for the intended audience of 10 to 14. I remember reading it a little bit younger and still having no problem reading it and understanding it, and I don't remember being like disturbed by anything, and I was a really wussy kid, so if I wasn't freaked out about it, I don't think most kids would be. So I recommend it not only for the intended audience, maybe a little bit younger and certainly a little bit older. It's very, very good. It's a very easy, quick historical fiction read, and I will always recommend Anne Rinaldi books. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys decide to stick around. This is Monday's video, so hopefully there will be one Wednesday and Friday. I do work those days too, so we're gonna have to be strategic with our filming and editing. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. See ya!